This campaign is called Tough Times from the Heart, giving a greater awareness around suicide prevention. And this is Warren Davies. And Warren knows what it's like to be on a farm and to be isolated, and how that isolation can make it so tough when you're trying to reach out for help. Since then, he's been trying to help others to get the help that they need. And with a mantra that simple conversations save lives. How have we changed the conversation, do you think, in the last few years around suicide? How have you seen it change?
Oh, I think like we've moved in, leaps and bounds. I think like from back, I suppose, when I was struggling, on my farm with my mental health, the conversations are a lot more freer, I suppose, but there's still a lot of stigma attached to, say, mental illness or suicide in our community.
Yeah.
I think, it's really still difficult for people to hold their hand up and say they need help. But I think the conversation has come a long way. So we've, lots of initiatives, lots of campaigns, lots of, stuff out in the media that just helps break down that stigma. But particularly in rural communities, though, I think there is that stigma still there where people just won't stick their hand up and ask for help.
You tell me, take me back there a bit. Tell me that first time that you said, I'm in a lot of trouble here.
Yeah, well, that was a long way down the path of my mental health journey, because I was that person. I was a farmer and a bloke, so I was probably tarred with the brush twice. Not wanting to stick my hand up, so I probably went down the rabbit hole a long way before I stuck my hand up and asked for help, and I think that really stifled my recovery as well. But sticking at, putting your hand up and asking for help is really difficult. And I say that as well as reaching in. If someone notices someone that's struggling, it's just as hard to reach in and start those conversations.
Can you remember the first time, though, that you felt it yourself? Because that's a realisation in itself, isn't it? It's different from actually talking to somebody else. Is you go, oh my God, what the heck? Something really wrong here. Something's not right with me. Do you remember what that feeling was like?
That feeling was scary. It was confusing. There was lots of emotions attached to that feeling of being lost, I suppose, is probably another good way of explaining it. It was just not having control, basically felt like free falling. And you had no control, and you couldn't work out, well, what do I grab onto here to stop that free fall? It was a very scary place to be, very lonely, because you feel it's something that I felt at that time, that I was the only person that was going through this. Realised really it's totally the other way. Your story's not unique. There's so many people out there that are struggling. But when you're in that moment, the real dark times, it's very lonely.
And also with a farm, one of the great things about it is you've got a little isolation, little time to yourself, little time to think and get away from the hustle and bustle, all of those sort of things that we know about being on a farm. The flip side to that, though, is when you're struggling and you need somebody to talk to, your options are limited,
yeah,
aren't you?
And I think that was probably one of my biggest mistakes, was to isolate myself on the farm, stop doing all the things that I love doing in my community, and just reverted back to just me on the farm. And you have a lot of think space in your head when you're by yourself, whether it's milking or on the tractor or just out in the paddock, where you've got that so much time to think and so much time to ruminate over stuff that's going in your head. And generally, when you're in that that dark space, or or you're spiraling out of control, your self-talk's not overly brilliant in your head, and that just exacerbates that isolation, exacerbates that conversation in your head, and you just keep and I think that adds to that spiral.
And one of those things too is that if you're if you're struggling or if you're failing, let's say that the farm is failing and not doing as well, there's no team around you to sort of say, "Hey, come, mate,
Yep.
we'll get him next time."
Yep.
We'll come in there. Like you can have in other businesses. It's just you sort of failing on your own.
Yeah.
That's must be just an awful, empty, crappy kind of feeling.
And that was probably when I talk about when I knew that I was struggling and like the drought was having an impact on us at this time, that I felt a lot of shame and guilt, because as a farmer, I was a steward to my animals and I was a steward to the farm, and I believe really strongly if I did both those parts of my job, look after my cows, look after my farm, that would enable me to look after my family. And then I started failing at that. I felt like I was failing, and that shame and guilt set in, and that really exacerbated that spiral that I was in, because, as you said, there was no one else to reach out to. You were it.
Did anyone, in this journey, so, you started feeling crappy, you were going along, you became honest with yourself at some point in saying, look, I feel bad. Did anyone say to you, what's wrong, mate? What's going on? You've been bloody quiet lately. And did anyone say that kind of thing to you?
No, look, obviously my wife knew that I was struggling, because obviously the closest person to you, but she was travelling the same journey as me as well. So I didn't reach out to her because I didn't want to burden her with how I was feeling, because I knew that she was, travelling the same journey. She was just dealing with it differently. But definitely, I think there wasn't that conversation, because people, it's a tough conversation to have with people, to reach in and ask them if they're because the biggest thing that we worry about is, what are they going to say, and what if they do say, oh no, I'm not struggling. And if I had said to one of my mates, look, I'm not travelling real well, would they have had the tools to be able to help me? That was probably the thing that would have been in their head. So no one really reached in. It was just, as I said, an empty space, but also that could have been in my head as well, because I was so shut off by this stage that there might have been people that were trying to reach in, but I just didn't see it.
And you're not thinking straight, are you? I mean, you're not. You're not at your best, really. Yeah.
Very, very clouded. One of the things I talk about when my mental health journey started, that I can now in hindsight look back to, was probably just really cloudy. That's all it was. And probably didn't think too much about it and didn't reach out for the help when I should have. And that cloud then turned into a bloody cyclone, really. It just started to spiral out of control over the next few years, until those trigger points on the farm, like the drought and the flood, and we had a family bust up on the farm, all had impacts on that spiral that made it quicker and quicker. And it's hard once you're in that spiral. It's hard for people to be able to reach in, or for you to see them reaching in. I suppose that's when you've asked that question, looking out, probably there was people trying to help me, but I just didn't see it.
Tell me about that cyclone.
It's a whirlwind part of your life, and it's, as I said just before, it's hard. You just don't know what you're going to latch onto to stop it. You're surrounded by people that love you. I've had a loving wife, loving parents, sister, I had kids, everything, and it's just, you're in this self-consuming kind of vortex that's just leading you to this dark space, which is really frightening, because you don't know where it's going to end and how it's going to stop, and then the more you get down that spiral, the harder it is to reach out. And I think that's why it's really important that we have these conversations, so people understand where people are at, to be able to reach in and try and arrest that spiral for people.
Talk about that spiral. It's that kind of thing of, I think when we sort of bring it towards suicide, you go through a week of feeling bad, you think, gee, it's not much fun, it's pretty crappy, we'll see what happens. A month of feeling bad,
Yep.
And you go, gee, this isn't, 2 months of feeling bad, 3 months of
Yep.
feeling bad. Then there comes that point of saying, what's the bloody point of all of this?
Yeah.
And that what you thought was a future doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah.
Is that how it felt for you?
Yeah, look, it felt like that. As I said, I was failing at what I love doing. I felt a lot of shame and guilt. I felt like I was letting a lot of people down, and then you get to a stage where, yeah, as you said, not where's the point of all this? And that for every person's a different journey. That can be a split-second decision. It can be, as you said, something that builds up over years. And it was just a really dark day where you thought, well, I'm failing at everything that I love doing. Being a husband, being a dad, being a farmer, and it's a yeah, it's a real crappy place to be.
What was that day?
That day was just, it's actually a blur of a day, and there was no particular point in that day that made sense, I suppose. And at the end of the day, it still doesn't make sense. The only thing it really taught me is that, I really, at the end of the day, I had two choices: either to continue to be bitter and spiral out of control, or I could become better. And I think that's the biggest lesson from that day.
Did you obviously didn't wake up that morning think that this might be your last day?
No.
As part of the plan.
No, and as I said, that the more people that you talk to and stories that you hear, that's the thing is no, and that's the hardest thing about suicide, I think, is that there's no fixed plan. Everyone's journey is different, and mine that day definitely wasn't. That day that was the plan. Where I've talked to other people, and it's obviously was their plan. Where that mine wasn't. That it was just kind of a split second decision that afternoon that could have had wholly different consequences to where we are today.
When you realised that you hadn't died and that you were still alive, what was that moment? Was that an epiphany kind of moment, or was there a lot of pain surrounding that, as in, geez, still here? What was that feeling at that point?
And I think if I go back to that, that life, it gave me two choices that day. It was, what's all this about? Do I just continue to be crazy and out of this crazy spiral out of control, or do I choose better? And I chose better that afternoon. But there was a lot of, what the hell's happened? How have I got to this place? Why haven't I talked to people? All the, which then, when you're in that mindset, it kind of adds to that whole spiral as well, because then you feel guilty because you haven't talked to people and you've got to this place, and it is a self-consuming thing, and it takes a lot of energy to arrest that spiral. And people just think, well, any mental health journey, it's just easy, just reach out and talk. Well, it's not.
No.
Sometimes that's a really long process, and I still say today that process is an ongoing thing with me as well. I need to be on top of my game now and have some tools in my mental health toolbox to be able to realise, when I am starting to probably err on that, into that spiral.
It's really important, isn't it? Because it's you're saying to people, you don't need to get to that shock.
Yeah.
That moment. You can pull up well and true. That doesn't have to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
Here, it doesn't have to go that way.
Yeah.
That's not the journey that you need to have.
Yeah.
There's another way of doing it, which is what we're trying to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing that really, really drives what I do today, is that I'm clearly under the understanding that I'm not going to be able to help everybody, but if I can help one person stop getting to that place where I got to, is that's important to me, and I think that all just by telling people you don't need to get to that spot, that's being a little bit hypocritical on my behalf, because it took me to get to that spot, but understanding what it feels like. I just don't want other people to get there, and so those conversations are really important. And staying connected to the people around you is so important, even though you don't realise it at the time. But it's so critical that we continue that conversation, reach out and ask for help, and stay connected to our support networks.
Think back to my coming from a country background myself. I always think about my grandfather. and he and another guy about the same age, only men, would always stop the utes together on the road like that and talk.
Yep.
You know the scenario I'm
Yep.
talking about. You'd see it
Yep.
does. There's pull up, and I can see the road now. They just pull up and they talk like that. I could not imagine for a second one of them saying to the other one, "Gee, I'm struggling. Gee, I'm really feeling it. I'm struggling a little bit this week. I'm not really sure what's wrong with me." And the other one saying something like, "Come on, let's go and have a cup of tea and talk it through." I just sort of couldn't imagine that. Now I suppose in their own way they're having that discussion,
Yep.
and they're feeling less isolated because they're having that chat. But I could not imagine them having that conversation.
No.
That's the change, isn't it?
That's the change, and that's the. I think that's what drives me. So the conversations that I have with people these days, like come and listen to me speak or whatever, the conversations they have with me, like they go, well, they realise, like I realise, that your story's not unique, and you're going through something that I'm going, or like I've been through, or I'm going through, and well, if you can talk about it, maybe I can talk about it. And I think that comes back to the mission that I'm on, and part of that mission is inspiring those conversations. And I think by sharing stories, storytelling's so important. By sharing stories, it empowers other people to share their stories. Well, that's what that's my aim and my purpose, to make sure that, people feel comfortable. And obviously that's not a conversation you're going to have with everybody. Not everyone's going to get it.
Yeah.
And not everyone's going to be able to support you through, if you opened up to someone. But definitely the blokes and farmers that I've talked to, that just that conversation, that is those utes crossing paths, having that conversation is really important, because sometimes those conversations aren't, geez, I'm really struggling.
Yep.
It could be just something else that'll lead to that, and it's just those ongoing conversations that just get stuff off their chest, or they might want to have a whinge about that it's rained too much, or it's too dry, or the sheep price or the milk price is too low, or diesel's too. It's getting that off their chest instead of internalising that and letting that add to that vortex. It's just getting those little pieces off, and you might not get to that core problem, but at least you're venting some of your frustrations.
It's changing, isn't it? We're getting there.
It's definitely changing, and as the conversation is totally like there's, I would suggest that 20 years ago, if I was doing what I'm doing now, that a bloke wouldn't come up and give me a hug after a talk and just say thank you. But it would have still been fairly closed shop, where now at least people are exploring their vulnerabilities and thinking like, well, that's okay. And that's obviously part of my mission as well, is creating that safe environment that's free from stigma, that makes people feel more comfortable to be able to explore their vulnerabilities and share that with other people.
A lot of alcohol in the in farming areas, isn't there too? A lot of painkillers.
Yeah.
In the amber painkiller.
Yep.
Has been pretty big for a long time.
Yep.
As well, and recognising that. Also looking at people and saying, "Oh, that guy's just a piss pot," you know. But changing that language, instead of looking at somebody and saying they're just a piss pot, maybe looking at the fact that they've been struggling for a hell of a long time.
That's correct. I think one of the biggest skills that any of us can possess is being non-judgmental. Everyone's travelling a journey that we know nothing about. Unless you want to go and help those people explore that journey, you can't make comment from afar. I think you've got to understand it, because everyone's actions are generally born out of their journey, and whether it's alcohol, or it's physical abuse, or just being a loudmouth, or and it's even like you right back,
Punch-ups, getting involved in punch-ups in the country,
or
big
just
part of it.
just showing your trying to show your alpha maleism, I suppose. It's all part of that. There's backstories to all of that, and it's just trying to find out what they are, and trying to get those people to the stage where they can explore their vulnerabilities and understand, well, this is what's driving these behaviours. Yeah.
There's a good chance that someone's watching this right now and they're making a plan, or might even be making a date for when they take their own life. What do you say to them?
Oh, that's a really tough question. But the thing is that there is help out there. That's the The biggest thing is to know that there is people out there that will support you, regardless of what you think, what your perception is. There's people that love you. There's people that are out there wanting to support you, and you have to make that really that tough move, which is it's a really tough move to just reach out to any one of those people that are surrounding you to just reach out for some help.
How do you feel talking about it?
I get asked this question a fair bit. It's a cathartic experience for me, sharing my story, and the more that I share my story, that becomes more and more cathartic, because I know by sharing my story empowers other people to share theirs, and then that kind of arrests their spiral. You know, my passion is to, you know, if there's one person that resonates with my story and it helps them or helps someone that they love, you know, if they can share that wisdom with someone that they love, then it helps them on their journey. That's what drives me.
That thing too of that dark day right in the centre of the cyclone for you, if you had I don't want to say the word succeeded, but had you have died that day, and all of those other things, and the things with your children now and your family, and the help that you're giving other people, those things are kind of erased, and we don't want that to happen to people, do we?
No.
Because 2 months has been erased.
That's right, and it's you know, I think people, like it's always said that people that die from suicide don't want to die, they just want to stop the pain, and we need to come to the understanding that pain can be stopped by just reaching out or reaching in, whichever way it is, and trying to, and just talking about it. And it sounds so simple, and I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but just conversations are so important. You know, simple conversations save lives. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, but Warren, it does need to be simple, doesn't it? Because if it's not, if somebody says, right, for you to feel better, I need you to do these 7 things.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, you know, it's
Yeah,
okay, right. I don't think I'm really up to doing those 7 things, but that simplicity of talking to somebody first up,
Yeah.
you know, admitting that, well, not admitting, but talking to somebody about how you're feeling is that thing.
Well, that's, I believe that's the biggest step. Like getting to that stage where, one, you've recognised and acknowledged that something's going on here, and then taking that a bit further by then reaching out to someone and talking to them about it. That's a massive step in the whole, you know, recovery process. Once you've made that, you're on the right path. It's and then as long as you're building a strong support network around you as you go, I think that's really important. That's, you know, the next step, and whatever that network looks like, that support network looks to you, whether it's friends, family, you know, professional people like doctors and psychologists, and that, and you start building this team around you that then helps you propel you out of that vortex, if you like, and then back out into the clear weather.
And pushing around a little more love doesn't hurt, does it?
No, like it's it does pay compassion and love for a fellow human being, something that, you know, sometimes gets a little bit lost in this busy world that we live in. I think that plays a big part.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because we are getting better at talking about suicide and mental health, but at the same time we have a little disconnection with social media. I don't want to blame social media for everything, but we've got that little disconnection that's creeping up around us as well. So we're getting better, but still, you know, we'll disconnect and we'll bully.
Yeah.
There's still bullying is still a huge problem that people don't even know that they're doing it sometimes.
Yeah. So social media is a fantastic thing. We wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation if it wasn't for social media. But on the dark side of it, it is. It's those people that, you know, I think you know, it's really important before you post anything or comment on anything that you think about it. And if you weren't prepared to go up face to face with that person and say into their face what you are typing, well, you should hit the backspace button and just leave it, because a lot of those faceless words that go out there have a massive impact on people, especially like young people, but for all sort of, you know, for all ages as well, and they are very detrimental because words hurt. Like, and once those words are out there, they're out there, and then it just becomes like this feeding frenzy on social media that it just keeps piling on. And if someone's in a really vulnerable state, well, that doesn't help their process of trying to become better. It's just driving them further and further down.
One of those things that we don't sort of practice, the compassion. We lose it sometimes, don't we? We've got to check ourselves once in a while and say, how am I handling this situation with these people? Am I being compassionate? Am I dismissing them? Am I not looking at it from their perspective?
Yeah. And it is, and you've got to, I think that's, being empathetic is really important, putting yourself in those people's shoes, and even if you're not in that situation or never been in that situation, just have a think about, well, how would that feel? And if you think, well, that's going to feel fairly crappy, well, then you reaching out to that person and making sure they're okay, or just giving them a hug, or just a pat on the a hand on their shoulder, and just say, I've got you here, or I've got your back. It's just that's how the world should be.
It's all we've got is each other, isn't it? Really, that's all there is.
At the end of the day,
there's not much else going on, is there?
No, it's life is very complicated, but it's fairly simple at the same at the same time. Simply, without it, we've got nothing. At the end of the day, when the world all breaks down, like when everything's broken down, that's all we've got.
You feel grateful for how things have turned out for you and what you are these days?
Gratitude is one of the things that I talk about. I'm always grateful for the opportunity to be able to share my story. I'm grateful for my family and grateful for my friends and my community. It's something I'm grateful for every day, and seeing the goodness in that, and trying to not ignore the darkness, but trying to see the goodness in everything is really important. And there is a lot of good out there, and I think we're driven by, whether it's media influences or opinions of people that we place on a pedestal, that there's a lot of negativity in the world, but there's not. There's a lot of positivity, and we need to amplify that.